And I was 29, turning 30, and I remember saying to myself, if I can't find a professional job in Japan, I'm going to go back to the States.
This morning I am pleased to say that I have a longtime friend, and a friend in the respect that I met him when I was at the American Chamber of Commerce. That's when I really became aware of him, because he called me into his office. Actually called me when I was in Kobe, and I thought it was a prank. And he said, as VP, we feel you have an obligation to the chamber. And I said, what is that? He said, I think you should run. We want you to run for president. And my knees got weak. I was up on the 10th floor. My knees got weak, and I thought it was a joke. And he said, no, Lance, I'm serious. When you get back to Tokyo, come into the office. And I said, I'm not interested. And he talked to me, asked me to stay away from the club for about a week. You remember that, don't you?
I do.
He said, stay away from the club for a week, the American club, that is, because I was only interested in becoming president here. I didn't think the chamber was possible for me. And through the art of his persuasion, he easily got me to run, and against the person I didn't want to run against. I told him, he said, no worry. Sounds like a military recruiter. Yeah, we'll give you anything you want. Just come on in. But thanks to him, it was one of the best experiences of my life. I can't thank him enough for having the opportunity and having that experience, because I sure wouldn't have done it on my own. So without any further ado, I want to introduce you to Marc Fuoti.
Good to see you, Lance.
Good to see you, Marc.
Yeah, those were great times, and I guess my sales skills were pretty good back then, huh?
They were on point, because I'm a salesman. I was trained as an investment
salesman
consultant.
selling to the salesman.
But they say salesmen are the easiest people to sell if you're good.
Okay.
Don't you agree?
I agree, yes.
Because you respect the art, and if the guy's really good, he's going to make sure that you get something that everybody wins on.
Right.
He's not trying to take anything from you. Those are scam artists.
Yeah, exactly.
But a salesman shows you something in a way that you may not have thought of, and helps you feel good about what you're doing.
Sure. And of course I remember those days very clearly, and I was really interested in seeing a bit of a change in the American Chamber, and I think you represent. I think
change. That was up to you?
Well, it wasn't up to me, although I was the chair of the nominating committee. Okay. And of course we talked with the members of the committee. We talked about how we wanted any election to go, and I actually oversaw 2 elections. Debbie Howard as well was a candidate that we brought into into the election, and that was all. It wasn't like a strategic plan, but there was a concept where let's see a little more variety and a little more inclusiveness in the American Chamber, and big companies, small companies, men, women, it was that kind of objective.
Well, it was. I guess that was objective, but of course, my ethnicity made the big difference.
It did, and I thought it was great.
Not just that, but also because I was the first independent businessman.
Exactly right.
I had a small. I'm the one that changed the. It used to be called a Small Business Committee, and when I got on it, I said, "Why are you calling it small business? Because by doing that, you're giving the wrong impression. Mm-hmm. Just because, in those days, your company was judged by how many people were in it. Right. I said, that has nothing to do with how much money it has. Right. How much revenue.
Or how innovative or how exciting or interesting it is.
So I said, you should call it an independent business.
I remember that, yeah.
And we changed it to that name. Right. And I guess it served well in more ways than I thought. But that was a good time. You were right over Hobgoblins at the time. You were with Universal Studios?
I was with 20th Century Fox at the time. Yeah, I was running Asia Pacific region for the home entertainment division during the boom of DVD. Okay. I mean, it was a fun time to be in the entertainment business, especially in that part of the business. And it was interesting because it required packaged goods, fast-moving consumer goods expertise, as well as, of course, you're in the entertainment business. How do you sell a movie? Right. So it was a very interesting time. But yeah, that was the Hobgoblin was upstairs, and
no, you were upstairs.
You were upstairs. The Hobgoblin was downstairs. That's right. Yeah.
And you as a result of that, you've always been an entrepreneur in your own rights, or you've always had that spirit.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comment, because I've never considered myself an entrepreneur, because I guess I've always considered an entrepreneur somebody who built something new, or created something completely innovative. I mean, I've lived, half of my life has been corporate and half of my life has been entrepreneurial, but not in what my conception of an entrepreneur is. Startup this, startup that. I went from being a corporate guy to a consultant, to a business strategy consultant, to an entrepreneur, in the sense that I started my e-commerce business, which then evolved into this import business, which now kind of morphed into a trading company.
Right.
And I don't know that I could have predicted any of those steps along the way.
So where did Big Picture Inc.
Yeah, that's right.
Big Picture Inc. (BPI) come in the picture? Because you've always been in the media business, right?
I was in advertising. I was in
Advertising
advertising
first,
for
right.
about 10 years before that, and I made it to senior VP of McCann Erickson, Hakuhodo at the time. That's how far back that goes.
Well, you came to Japan in 85?
I came in Japan in 88.
88, okay.
And as a backpacker, so I have very humble beginnings and non-corporate beginnings. My career in the United States was as a mental health specialist. I was in the field of psychology, which is to this day still my passion, by the way. At some point I'll get a PhD and hopefully practice psychology. But left to travel around the world for a year. Ended up landing in Japan without any plan to be here. There's an ex-girlfriend story in that. Okay. Landed in Japan, walked out the door from Narita and just said, I love this place. It was an intuitive sense of belonging and loving.
Isn't that interesting? Mark, tell me, where were you born?
I was born in New Jersey.
In New Jersey?
Yeah.
Okay. How many siblings?
I have a sister who now lives in Florida.
How many years difference between the two of you?
She's a year and a half older than me. And
You
she's
guys are
a really
tight.
good friend of mine.
I was going to say, you guys would be very tight because
Yeah, we're very tight.
Being that close, you grew up almost seeing the same things at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
And most of my rock and roll roots come from her.
Okay. Now tell me this, because you have this exotic look to you. Okay, and people, I'm sure, I've always thought that when I met you, then when you told me to come in, I said, wait, are you Greek? Or when I say exotic, it's not the WASP.
Okay,
look.
yeah, well, I've
The
got
typical WASP you have in there,
I've
so-
got a Mediterranean look, and
Okay.
my family's from Sicily. My father's family and my mother's family. My father was born in Italy, in Sicily. But both of their families traced their lineage back, I think, 500 years on the island of Sicily. So I'm 100% Italian, Italian-American, typical East Coast, New Jersey, lived in New York, lived in Philadelphia.
Did you ever learn the language?
I didn't. Although I kind of remember when I was a kid talking to my grandparents who spoke almost no English, having some communication in
Grandparents
Italian.
on your mother or father's side?
On my father's side, because they were Italian-born.
Okay.
My mother's parents, my grandparents on my mother's side, were all born in New York.
Okay.
So yeah, and it's funny because I've traveled all around the Mediterranean, on the North Africa, the Middle East, and Southern Europe, and whatever country I go to, they speak to me in their language.
I mean, they assume you're from
Yeah,
there.
I was
would
from
think that.
Morocco,
would think
I
that.
was
Right,
from Egypt,
exactly.
I'm from
Yes,
Israel, I'm
you can
from
get that.
Greece.
You can get that. Well, see, I think also if you went into the South American countries, people would think you're from there. I think
Fine.
people would think that you're a Mexican.
I
and
love
they
my
would think that-
Latin,
Yeah, Latin Latino feel, yeah.
roots. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? So, what kind of child were you growing up? Let's say in elementary. I want to take you back in time
Wow,
a little
okay.
bit. So, in elementary school,
It's a long time.
were you more of an academic kid, or were you more really physical?
Actually, I was kind of a little of both. I played baseball growing up. I was in all the sports groups. Played Little League baseball, loved it. Some of my best memories are, the smell of a leather glove on your hand, a little bit of sweat, and, playing baseball as a kid up until I was about 16 years
Was
old.
your dad really involved in your?
My dad and I, my dad was my catcher in the backyard, and I pitched to him. I was a decent pitcher. I never made it into high school ball, though. But and I did fairly well academically. I was, always a good student. I liked studying. I liked learning. I liked partying. I was in New Jersey in the late '70s.
Well, this is after school, though. This
Of course, yeah, after school. But I would go to Madison Square Garden, go to the rock concerts. So I always felt like I had a little bit of everything. I can hang out with academic-oriented kids. I can hang out with the sports kids. I can hang out with the party kids. And I felt very comfortable in any one of those groups.
How are your parents doing now?
Well, my dad passed 17 years ago. In fact, on August 9th, so it's always a day that I remember. I was very close to my father.
Did your mother and father stay together the whole time?
Yeah, they did. Oh, they were soulmates in many ways. And looking at their relationship really, I don't know if it's guided me. It certainly let me know what a perfect relationship is, and I'm not sure I have one. But they loved each other very much, and they were very, very close to each other. We had a very good family life. Visited the grandparents, visited the cousins, typical Italian family. Food everywhere, go to New York City, hang out in Brooklyn, go to the Jersey Shore together. I mean, we did all of those things together. And even to this day, I go back to New Jersey. In fact, I'm going back next week. And I'll hang out with my cousins. We'll go to their house for dinner. We go to the Jersey Shore. We'll go to concerts together.
Now, these cousins, are they your mother's side?
They're on my dad's side. My mom was an only child. My dad had 3 siblings, and my Uncle Joe, Giuseppe, who I was very close to, had 9 kids.
9 kids.
So I have
same wife? Same wife?
Same wife. Oh, okay. You're Roman Catholic. You kidding me? 9 kids, Roman Catholic, right?
My goodness. Mom's doing okay?
Mom is doing great. She'll be 92. Her birthday's on September 25th. Okay. Mine's on the 24th. So we always had that bond of, the birthday celebration. She'll be 92.
Is she living alone?
She lives alone. She spends 8 months a year in New Jersey and 4 months a year in Florida with my sister during the winter. Right? We don't want her on the ice and the cold weather. Yeah, so she's a snowbird. She flies down to Florida and lives with my sister. But so get this. So she turns 90, she'll be 91 this year. She turns 90 last year. And in March, my sister Linda and I say, Ma,
wait, your sister's named Linda?
Linda, yes.
So is mine.
Is that right?
Right next to me.
Okay, very good. Is she older or younger than you?
She's younger.
Okay.
I have 2 younger sisters, my older brother, yeah.
So I say to my mom, Ma, what do you want to, you're 90, what do you want to do? Why don't we go to the city, we'll go to a show, we'll take you to dinner. She says, no, I want to go to Ireland. And my sister and I look at each other like, what? I've never been to Ireland, and I want to go to Ireland. So my sister and I said, okay, all right, she's 90, we'll take her to Ireland. So last August, we go to London for 3 days, and we go to Ireland for 8 days. And she's walking around. We go to the pubs. She's hanging with us the whole time. So I said, Ma, that's it, right? You did it, right? 90 Ireland, 91 now. So my sister and I, same thing. Ma, what do you want to do for your 91st birthday? She says, well, Linda just bought a flat in Palermo. I want to go see the flat. So here we are, September 6th, packing up the family, going to Palermo for 10 days for my mom's 91st birthday. And we're going to see it, which I of course I love, but I'm saying, I'm looking at my mom, it's just, this tiny little Italian woman, but
very active.
Sicilian women,
right.
they got the power, right?
Okay.
And I'm like, Mom, when are you gonna, I'm thinking to myself, I don't say this to her, when is she gonna slow down? And you know something? Beautifully, no end in sight.
You shouldn't. That's beautiful.
So yeah, it's great. So
I'm pleased to say that I have a mother the same way.
Okay.
She came here. I said, Mom, on her. I went to the States. She had a big 90th birthday.
Okay, right. How long? When
All
was
of
that?
her sisters in San Bernardino.
Okay.
In California.
When was it?
It was she's 94. She's the same age as this club, so it was 4 years ago.
Oh, so she's a little bit older than my mom.
Yeah. She was born in 1928.
Wow.
Same year as the club.
Wow.
So that helps me to put all the dates together.
Fantastic.
So I go there. My brother, my sisters are there. All the families. Her only living sister, who's older than her, and her husband.
Good genes.
Her husbands were there. Yeah. So she puts it on, speaks to everybody. It's an all-day event, and we go bowling afterwards because she loves bowling. So on her 91st, just before her 91st birthday, I called up and said, Mom, what do you want to? Are you have any plans for your 91st birthday? She said, no. I said, would you like to come to Japan again? She said, sure. I flew over here. Now this is the kick.
Nice.
I flew over here, pick her up at the airport. We go bowling right away, and she beats me the first game. And I wasn't trying to let her win by 2 points.
That's amazing.
Beat me by 2 points.
She must have
and
been.
she said a win. She said a win's a win. She said a
She
win's
must
a
have
win.
loved that.
Oh, but can you believe our mother's
That's
at this
fantastic.
time?
Well, my mom's not bowling. She's doing chair yoga, but she's not bowling at 94.
She's been bowling.
That's
and
incredible.
matter of fact, I'm asking her. No, I'm asking. She said she hasn't bowled because of COVID.
Yeah.
It stopped everything. And
Right.
her biggest fear is her knee giving out. And this is it, being embarrassed by falling in the lane. And I said, Mom, I got you. I hear you. Take your time. And still do it. So I'm trying to get my sister to take her this summer.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, get our mothers to meet.
Isn't that nice? That would be nice. But I think it's just because of modern medicine and them having a life without having their kids are doing okay.
Yeah, right.
They don't have the kind of stress that other people do, and I think that creates more deaths than anything else.
Sure.
Going through school, when you got into junior high school, in high school, what were the areas that you were really starting to find, I like doing this or like studying this? What were the
Yeah,
things you really
not so
focused
much in junior high school was miserable.
Was it?
It
Where
was
was it?
absolutely miserable.
What happened in junior high
Well,
that made it miserable?
I grew up just south of New York City, and the town I grew up in was really small, and they didn't have a junior high school or high school, so they had to bus me into this other neighborhood.
How long did it take?
Oh, it wasn't that far. It's 20 minutes by bus,
was
but
the
it might have been.
neighborhood.
It might have been the other side of the world. You know, we got bused, and
Okay.
you know, the little town I lived in was called Menlo Park Terrace, the Terrace. So we'd get off the bus and we'd hear, they're the Terrace kids. So, you know, fights and bullies and anyway, it was not the most fun time in my life.
Was your junior high like ours in the States? It was just 3 years?
3 years.
7,
Thank
8,
God it
9?
was only 3 years. Thank
Yes.
God.
That's
it
when
was
they split it up
nine,
like
it was,
that.
what is it?
7, 8,
9,
9,
yeah.
right.
Did finish that. And then in high school, I also got bused, but it was to a much nicer neighborhood. And really loved it. Really, I think at that point I took off academically.
What did you start to do?
I had a teacher who taught psychology in my senior year, and it's like the world opened up for me. I'm like, this is it. Studying the human mind and consciousness, I'm like, what could be more interesting than that? And in fact, I think in my my high school yearbook, I wrote, you know, you have to write your thing. I said, to be a doctor of the mind. So, you know, I can't, and I actually moved in that when I went to school at Rutgers University. I graduated with a degree in psychology and got a job at the Mental Health Institute. And I got a job as part of a whole psychiatric team. And I did that for 5 years, and I was really happy about doing it. It was in an element career-wise that I wanted to be in. But I realized after 5 years that was not for me. I mean, I was in a psychiatric ward working, and you know, schizophrenia and manic depressive and suicides and things like that. And I lasted 5 years it was the healthcare profession, full-on healthcare profession, part of a 5-member psychiatric team.
Did you find that really emotionally started to affect you?
It did. I mean, I loved it. It was a very strange feeling. I loved it because I loved helping people and I loved being in that environment of psychology. But it was just so depressing because it was a chronic mental illness ward. And you realize that nobody gets fixed, right? Unfortunately, it's a kind of a terminal or a lifelong struggle for these very brave and very beautiful people in many ways. But I couldn't do it anymore. So after 5 years, I quit. And I remember when I was saying goodbye to my colleagues, some of them had been working in the field for 30 years. I said to them how much I respected them and appreciated them, because it really takes a very unique human being to be able to not only work in that environment, but thrive and help people in it. But it was also at that point where business started interesting me. Along the way, I started a company. I guess you could say I was entrepreneurial. I started a company called Holistic Guide, and I started publishing a lifestyle magazine, a new age lifestyle magazine called Growth.
What year are we talking about now?
This was probably mid-'80s. Because I graduated with a degree in psychology, and in my last couple of years at Rutgers, I started taking yoga and karate classes. And I remember thinking to myself, the yin yang of karate, which is of course very aggressive and very physical, and yoga, which is very mental and very relaxing. And I thought that was, and to this day, I've done karate throughout my life, and I've done yoga throughout my life. In fact, I became a yoga teacher when I was in the United States. So I lived a really holistic lifestyle. I was doing yoga, I was doing martial arts, I was a vegetarian for 3 years, and I thought, well, I wonder if I can make a business of this. And in that time, in the late 80s, mid-late 80s, that whole New Age lifestyle was really emerging. I thought it was a kind of an interesting point of, can humanity progress to an enlightened state? And how would you do it? What would the society need to move that way? Well, it would need to be tolerant. It would need to be chilled out. It would need to be peaceful, and it would need to be introspective, right? You need, in order to be enlightened, you need to have an understanding of yourself in your world. So I started this company and built a team, and we started selling a newspaper, a magazine. We did events. And I thought, oh, I like this. I kind of like this money making and business, and I'm a bit of a showman, so I would lead all these programs, and we did this past life regression, this thing, and we did this meditation retreat, that thing.
How old are you at this time?
I was 25, 24, 25.
How many people did you have with you?
At that time, I think we had a team of about 7 people. I had an editor. I had
Now this is you. Did you have? I mean, you built your team, but did you have anybody that was equal with you? Like a partner in any way?
In the end, yeah, the editor of because the magazine was the key. Growth magazine was the key, and the editor, who I went to school with at Rutgers, really became my business partner. So I kind of took the business side of things, organized the events, did the marketing, paid the bills, did the advertising, and he really concentrated on the quality of the magazine.
So in today's lingo, that would be website.
Absolutely, there's nothing like that back then. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't think. I wish we did.
I'm just thinking some of the younger people watching this won't know. When you say magazine,
it was a published paper.
They won't understand how much importance that had. That was your website.
Oh my God,
isn't that interesting? Isn't that
mid-80s though? That's 40 years ago, man. Oh my God. I'm not sure I want to be reminded of that.
If you didn't have a magazine, you could forget it. That wasn't the way to go. You would be door to door then.
Yeah, exactly. And in some ways it was.
Yeah.
But then, I met a Dutch woman and went to Amsterdam, stayed with her and hung out with her in Amsterdam, and fell in love with Europe. Absolutely. 25 years, first time I had ever been to Mexico and Canada, but I'd never really traveled outside of North America. And I'm like, Europe's it. They've got the lifestyle, they've got the culture. I want to live in Europe. So I remember thinking to myself, okay, I got to figure out a way to get to Europe. Okay, well, in the meantime, though, I want to travel, right? That really sparked a travel bug in me that was already there. I mean, when I graduated from university, I turned down a job at the mental health center, full-time position, because I planned to drive around the States, going to all the national parks that I could. And I said, no, this may sound a little bit funny. I did something called the I Ching. I Ching is a Taoist book on philosophy. So Taoism is a Chinese spiritual religion. And part of this Taoism practice is you have these wooden sticks and you throw them, and the way they land gives you some insight into what you should do. Of course, it sounds silly to me now, but at the time I was kind of like, okay, let's do the I Ching and let's see, should I take the full-time job or should I travel for 2 months, 3 months and go around the United States? Through the sticks, and I'm with my girlfriend at the time and we're looking at it and she says, you gotta go on the trip. That's the answer. So I said, all right. So I went back to the mental health center where I was working part-time, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn down your full-time offer because I'm going to travel around the States. And they said to me, fine, you've been great, we want you. Next full-time position comes up, we can offer it to you. So that's when I got the idea, you can have your cake and eat it too. which might have spoiled me because I'd kind of tended to live my life like that. You know, don't give it up and go get what you originally turned down anyway. So I've tried to live my life that way. But anyway, I did the trip and I loved it, and I got my full-time job, and then I started a holistic guide. Then I traveled to Europe, and then I said to myself, I want to travel around the world. I want to travel around the world. I'm going alone. Sold my company, put the money into tickets and travel, and said I'm going for a year.
What's your age now?
So I'm 27. This is July 87. And I end up going to Europe first, hanging out in Amsterdam, traveling around Europe, traveling around the North Africa and the Middle East. And the Dutch woman.
You didn't go to Sicily?
I didn't. No, I did not. No.
Why wouldn't you go to see your ancestry? I mean,
Well, to be
I'm just
honest,
curious, yeah.
I was really more interested in developing countries travel. Like, I wanted to go to Israel. I want to go to Egypt. I didn't want to necessarily travel around in Europe that much. I really wanted to go to Africa, Middle East, Asia, and Latin America. I didn't want the familiarity of a European or North American culture. So this is a little bit funny story. So I'm in Cairo, and back then there was no cell phones, no internet. In order for me to get my mail, I had to go to an American Express office. And I would go to the office in whatever country I'm in and then say, well, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be in this next city. Please forward my mail there. So I'm in Cairo, I go to the American Express office, and I'm going through my mail, and there's a postcard from Tokyo. And one side, I'll never forget it, one side is Ginza at night, and one side is Tokyo Tower lit up at night. And I turn it over, it's from Ellen, the Dutch woman who I was she was my girlfriend from Amsterdam. And she says, I'm in Tokyo. It's the greatest city in the world. You must come. So at that point, I had no plans to travel to Japan. I was going to travel through India, Pakistan, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, Australia, Latin America, and back. Because I thought, oh, Japan's too technological. It's too advanced. I want this developing world kind of gig. So I said, well, maybe I'll go to Tokyo. And then we started talking, called her, oh, you can get a job here, you can teach English. So I thought, okay, that's a good idea. I'll go there, teach English, hang out for 6 months, make some money, and then go to the Philippines. Well, then you know the story. I landed in Narita, doors open, I'd been traveling for 6 months. It was air conditioned, the electronic doors open, the taxi, I'm like, oh my God, I love this place.
So you like electronics too? You like the modernization of the world?
Well, I started liking that.
You didn't know that you liked it so much.
I didn't know that I liked, one of the great things about living in Tokyo is it is a advanced, developed.
It's the future.
It's the future, but it's also got a really,
you can
traditional vibe to it, right?
Yes.
But anyway, that's what brought me to Japan, right? Like I said, when I
Her
mapped out
postcard.
when I mapped out my trip, Japan was never on it.
Never on it at all.
And then here I am, 35 years later.
Bingo.
Haven't
left.
Haven't left. So that's what is that? Serendipity, fate? I don't know.
Right.
A chaotic universe? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm here. I'm having fun, and I love it.
So as a resident or as a local, basically in a way, you got all of your jobs that way. So they didn't bring you from overseas.
No, they didn't. But I also got lucky.
Did you get expat packages?
No, yeah, I did. So this is also probably one of the reasons I stayed, because I was relatively successful in business, and I was able to get to fairly senior positions. So I started out as an English teacher, taught it a year and a half. I'm like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Took 6 months off for the blue period. So those of you who might like Van Gogh know that he had a blue period, very creative period, but also a very quiet, maybe depressed period for him. But for me, it was a very introspective period. I lived in a small room. I had no television. I had music.
What happened to the Dutch girl?
We broke up.
Okay. Just curious, not that
No,
you mean it
no,
was
we
other relatives.
stayed 6 months together. She lived with me for 6 months in New York. I was living in New York at the time.
Right.
She lived with me for 6 months, and then I lived with her for 6 months. I kicked her out after 6 months in New York. She kicked me out after 6 months in Tokyo, and it was perfect symmetry. It was absolutely perfect symmetry.
That's neat. It's really nice.
So yeah, and then for 6 months I traveled around Japan, hitchhiked around Japan, by the way, which I thought was quite
Now
interesting.
that year was 88?
This was 88.
88,
and it was interesting. You know, at that point it was I think 89 or 90.
Okay.
And did some great hitchhiking in Tohoku.
Well, how was your Japanese? Had you?
No, I started studying Japanese at the time, and my Japanese is far from perfect.
But I'm
now.
saying, but when you decided to start hitchhiking, that's when you said, okay, you took your little dictionary with you, and you started trying to pick it up. Then you figured you'd be almost forced into it.
I did during that 6 month period, the quiet period. I started studying Japanese.
Okay.
So
And
I certainly was able.
I think Walkmans were big then too. weren't
They were. Yep.
That
I
was
had a
the-
Discman and a
Right,
Walkman.
Walkman,
Yeah,
right.
of course. Yeah, Sony was off the charts at the time, right? So then I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I was 29, turning 30. And I remember saying to myself, if I can't find a professional job in Japan, I'm going to go back to the States. So I gave myself the 6 months. I had that 6 month period. And luckily, I answered an ad in the Japan Times for a marketing director at a advertising agency. And I applied and I got the job. I was a little bit surprised. Not so much. I mean, when I was doing Holistic Guide, I was doing advertising and I was doing marketing, and I guess that certainly helped. And ended up working my way up in that small company, and then I got headhunted to McCann Erickson, and I became a senior VP, kind of a hybrid expat package, not a full expat package.
Wait, now I just missed a little something. When
Yep.
you got headhunted, what were you doing?
I was at I was at a company called Japan Marketing Data Systems.
Okay, and you'd gotten that job from looking in Japan Times.
That's right. Worked there for 5 years.
Oh, 5 years.
5
Oh,
years.
Okay, so you really had some substance.
Yeah,
there.
yeah, absolutely. And then I was
And people were
head-
getting to know you.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Actually,
that-
no. I'm
that's what's-
just
'cause I'm
remembering
trying to
now. I wasn't. I was a leader in the ACCJ at that point. I was the head of the direct marketing committee, and actually, I wasn't headhunted. The gentleman that I replaced at McCann Erickson, we worked very closely in business. I used McCann Erickson, and they used my company services. He left to go to Time magazine, and he nominated me. It wasn't a headhunt. I was nominated, and McCann Erickson hired me. Put me on this hybrid expat package. I became a board member of McCann Erickson as well, which
Now
was
that's after the first company that you worked with that you found Japan Times.
That's right,
again.
yes. 5
And you were
years
5
there.
years. And
Yep.
what position did you have when you were headhunted?
well, I wasn't.
The
Again, I
company
wasn't
that-
headhunted. So, yeah,
I mean, when you were nominated.
I
to go
was
in there.
I was executive vice president, number 2 in that company.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how big was the company? Because
there's 80 employees.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of worked my way up, but I how to say this? It was too small for me.
Okay.
So I was happy to move to McCann Erickson, have a big company with a lot of resources around.
Now let me
me.
ask you, at that time, were you living the expat life?
I was, again, it was hybrid. I had an apartment in Roppongi, somewhere over there.
Or was it tatami or was it a
No, it was a
gaijin style?
it was a townhouse. It was nice.
Okay.
It was,
Did you have a car?
I did have a car. I had a motorcycle and a car. I know you're a big
okay.
motorcycle
Right,
guy.
right.
No, and I tell you, and again, I guess I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If I didn't have that level of success and comfort, I don't think I would have stayed.
Okay.
I mean, I'll be very honest about
Well, so you
saying
can
that.
understand. I understand. No,
right?
because that's really important. A lot of people that watch this podcast are kids or people that are trying to get their way here. And they don't understand that there really are a couple of different levels here in Japan.
Yeah.
For foreigners. I like to say there's two. I like to say there's the foreigners that are surviving and the foreigners that are thriving.
I've heard you say this.
And if you're surviving, this is the wrong place to be. You don't want to try to survive in
I
Japan.
totally agree with you.
I don't care what you're doing. You don't want to work in the
No, I
7-Eleven
agree.
and be working here.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the other side is such a vast difference.
Yeah.
The lifestyle and everything, and I wouldn't want to be here otherwise.
No, I agree.
So that's why I was under.
Yeah, and so I made that decision when I did that. I said if I don't get I'm not going to be 30 teaching English in Japan, right? So I moved to McCann Erickson, and there I was headhunted to 20th Century Fox, and that was a very interesting, one of those real forks in the road where
now,
you
how
have to
did that
decide.
work? Yeah.
Well, at that point, I developed my profile, and when younger people ask me, what's a good way to be successful? I said, raise your profile, become a chairperson of a ACCJ committee, publish something, get your face out there somewhere. And of course, back then there was not something like this, where now I'm on a podcast, for example. But I said, do whatever you can to raise your profile.
And one more thing I'd like to add to that, because it's so true. Just like you're in the alcohol business right now, it's the story.
Absolutely.
If you don't make your story sound appealing, nobody wants to do it.
I agree. You're a brand in a sense. You're a commodity,
how well
right?
You make your story.
How do you differentiate
That's
yourself
right.
from somebody else?
There you go.
So at that point, I had done very well in McCann Erickson as well. And
Are you married at this time?
I was, yeah. I got married to Minako in 1994, so it'll be 30 years next year.
Now, who were you working with then?
I was with JMDS at the time.
Okay.
And almost 30 years. So with McCann Erickson, I kind of rose to a pretty important position worldwide. The head of the group that I was working with, McCann Relationship Marketing, was a really famous advertising guy named Stan Rapp, who created the Rapp and Collins agency. So he was hired by McCann to develop their relationship marketing business, and Stan and I really grooved together. I was really in awe of this guy, and he seemed to really like me. We did some really fun stuff together, and like a lot of times in life, you have to choose. At the same time I was headhunted to Fox, Stan says to me, Mark, I want to bring you back to New York, and I want you to be my #2 guy worldwide. So here I am, Jersey boy, loved New York, lived in New York, advertising, Stan Rapp as my mentor, or Senior Vice President, Asia Pacific, 20th Century Fox, running the home entertainment division. That was the fork.
How many years had you had here by that time?
That time, that would have been 98.
But how many years had you?
Yeah, so I came to Japan in 88, so it was 10 years.
That's the point.
That is a point. I was what?
That was for
I was
me,
38 years old. So
Yes.
I built some career. I kind of raised the profile.
You're married now?
Married, and sat down with my wife and said, here's our choices. And she preferred to stay in Japan. Not that was an issue for me. And she said to me, Mark, movie business, film business, advertising? Come on. And I thought, and I thought the same thing. Of course, the film business is one of the most music, film, fashion. I mean, those are probably the 3 most fun careers to be in. And I was a little bit tired with advertising at that point. And I remember one of the main deciding factors for me was in advertising, you're full on in the marketing and advertising side, but you have no P&L responsibility. And I remember thinking, and I know because I've been in the ad industry for so long, they talk about going to the client side, right? Ad people. You're either an ad person for life, a lot of respect for them as well. I mean, almost as difficult as being in the mental health field, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
And or you get out and you go to the client side. And I remember that was probably the biggest deciding factor, because working with Stan, going back to New York City, getting into the New York ad industry, or running Asia Pacific for 20th Century Fox and getting on the client side. So it was in some ways it was also the easier decision. I didn't have to move. I didn't have to uproot my life. I love Japan. I'm like, something, I'm gonna go into the film business. And made that decision and don't regret it, although I do think, how would I have done in New York? How would I have done going back and, in the cutthroat, New York advertising industry? I don't know. I do think about it, but I certainly don't obsess about it. So anyway, that went to my career at 20th Century Fox, which lasted 8 years. And then by that time I was 45, 46, had a son at that point. We had our son very late, and said, I've got some money, I've got a lot of experience, I've had 20 years of corporate life. I think I'm gonna start my own business. And I thought, you need those three things. And I tell people, either you do it right out of college where you got nothing and you got nothing to lose, or you do it later in life when you've got money, you've got experience, you've got networks.
That's true.
And you've got, and you've got those three things.
I think another big thing too, you have a lot of people that you've already met that have done it.
Absolutely,
So
yeah,
you
you've
can
got a
ask them,
roadmap in many ways, right?
Yes, you don't have to take the same hard knocks they did.
Exactly.
I have this statue that I have a picture of, and it's a guy, and the title of it's called An Entrepreneur, but this guy is blindfolded, he has a chisel and a sledgehammer.
Right.
And he's sitting in this rock, and he's chiseling himself to here, and he's about to take the next blow, but he has a blindfold.
Right. Wow. Interesting.
That's an entrepreneur.
That's
That's
good.
Was
That's very dramatic too.
So
Yeah.
it is. I thought that was one of the best. If I could find that statue or have someone make that for me.
Okay. Right.
I like it. But I have to. Now that I'm older, I can say it, because when I was younger, I really loved saying I was an entrepreneur. But some people, and I would say a majority of them, think they're entrepreneurs, but they're actually, like I have been, a small business owner. I'm not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah.
I had an English guy explain to me what an entrepreneur is. Oh no, a French person.
Right. Okay.
Since it's their word.
Okay.
He said, an entrepreneur is a person who starts a company and can leave it, and it runs on its own without him. A Richard Branson. That's an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Because he doesn't have to be there, and he's still getting an income.
Right.
All my businesses, I must be there.
Well, I certainly wouldn't get an income if I was at my company now.
But you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a true entrepreneur.
Yeah, right.
When he can set it up, it runs, he goes up. Terry Lloyd is an entrepreneur.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He's good. I don't know enough about Mike Alfont and his businesses to know if he is, but he appears to be.
Well, yeah, I know Mike has started I think he's in the software business, right? He's in systems
we're
integrators.
talking about people that we've known for a long time.
Yeah, right.
There's so many people here that are true thrivers, and I try to keep myself around them.
Well, there are, and it surprises
you're one of
me.
them in my mind.
Well, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Although, it surprises me how many foreigners in Japan have started companies, made them successful, sold them, and made a lot of money. I think there's more out there than we know, and I think they're in the dozens or scores or more than 100.
And they don't want to be in this sphere, though. I've met so many of them that say, they're living very well.
Right.
Can do whatever they want to do for the rest of their lives, but they don't like joining, like the club or the chamber.
Okay, yeah,
and they think, because the appearance is, this for people in the club, and it isn't.
Okay, no, I don't think it is at all. But
that's the feel they get if they come in.
Yeah, I wonder. It could be that, but I think it also could be maybe they built their own business independently, and that's how they live their lives. They live their lives independently, and I have respect for both. So, I feel very comfortable. I was a member of the club for 10 years. Right. Getting back to the expat, Fox gave me a full expat package, full. I lived in a tower, ungodly rents that I would never pay. When I left Fox, I didn't live there anymore. And I was very grateful, and it was a really, really fun time for me. It was a very high growth professional time. I traveled all over Asia, and really enjoyed the fruits of that expat lifestyle, including 10 years as a member of the American Club. But my life is more humble now, and I don't mind that. I'm still committed to being successful in this business, in the business that I started. I'd like to leave a legacy.
Let's talk about that. What are you doing now? Let's get into what you're doing now.
Yeah, so big picture, when I left, I started, so you talked about the roadmap and having a mentor. Mm-hmm. Before I left Fox, I started talking to several of my colleagues and people that I knew, and I said, well, what do you do after you leave a corporate business without going to another corporate business? They said, you start consulting. You know what you're doing. I said, would you just hang out a sign and say Marc Fuoti consultant? They're like, yeah. And then go to your network, go to any clients that you've worked with or along the way, and fire up your network. okay. So I did that. I didn't physically put a sign up, but I said, okay, I'm going to be a consultant. So I set up Big Picture International as a market entry to Japan strategic business consultancy. And that's what I started doing. One of my first clients was Microsoft. I did a lot of work for HMV. I worked for Qualcomm. I did kind of classic business strategy consulting. And then I started doing a little bit on the market entry side for Asian companies, turned out. And did that for a few years. And I remember thinking, this is pretty easy. I didn't think it was going to be this easy. And then 2009, the financial crisis. So I went from 2005 to 2008, 3 or 4 years, smooth. Boom, the financial crisis. And guess what companies do when they're financially stressed?
They hold on to their cash.
They hold on to their cash and they fire their consultants.
That's right. They don't need the people that are least important.
Exactly. Well, they're important, but they're let goable.
They're let go.
So any of you out there that are interested in being a consultant know this: you get paid a lot when you're working. You don't get paid anything when you're not working.
That's true.
So, and then there were lean years. There were lean years. I'd say 2009 to 2013 were pretty lean years. And it wasn't easy. And I did have my doubts. And I did think it's a time to leave Japan. But I persevered. And around that time, very serendipitously, a very good friend and business partner of mine, Hunter Brumfield, who started his own company. He was doing translations, and he was also an older man ending up becoming an entrepreneur. He said, I'm doing this customs clearance work for companies, and every once in a while I get a product that's not easy to import. You need some type of lab testing or some type of import license. He said, are you interested in doing it? I said, sure. And at the time, I had a few Japanese people that were working with me. I said, let's try this. And we ended up helping a few companies get their difficult food products through customs. And that was the start. And I thought to myself, okay, wait a second. Import stuff, sell it online. I can do that. So once we got the import side done, then it was a matter of building a business that could sell. And that's when BPI became a e-commerce company. And we set up operations on Amazon, Rakuten, and Yahoo. And I built the company from there. So then BPI became an e-commerce company. And because we have our clients that we're importing products for, we have our own products that we're buying and importing, we've become a kind of trading company now. It's small. I mean, I'm not saying we're a big company, but we're importing containers of stuff, throughout the year. And it's a really wide variety of items. It's apparel, it's actually mostly food and beverage, but it's home appliances, it's computer-related equipment, it's sports equipment. So we've become kind of a trading company, I could say. And on the food and beverage side, we've been very, very specific and particular. It's craft premium foods and craft premium liquor and craft premium spirits and wines. So it's only like the best olive oil from Spain, for example, the best balsamic vinegar from Italy, the best whiskey from America. And on the whiskey side, the whiskey that we're importing and selling is called Uncle Nearest. This is not a shameless advertisement, but for those of you who love, this is your choice if you don't know this yet. So Uncle Nearest is one of the spirits that we're importing. There's 2 whiskeys. I just brought you this one. I know you love Uncle Nearest because you've come to two or three of our pairing dinners.
Yes.
So we do whiskey pairing dinners with barbecue at the best restaurants here in Tokyo. And I know you've come, and I know you love it, and I know you love the whiskey, and I know you love the backstory, right, of this being a black-owned distillery, And the history of Uncle Nearest being that the master distiller who basically invented Tennessee whiskey was a freed African-American slave named Nathan Green, who became Uncle Nearest because he was so close to the Jack Daniels family, they called him Uncle Nearest. He taught Jack Daniels how to distill whiskey. So I know you love this. I know you love this on so many different levels.
I do, because my sons are really into whiskey. I wasn't. For a long time, I was a vodka drinker.
All right, okay.
Because my father was a vodka drinker. But what he drank, I couldn't touch. Smirnoff.
Okay, yeah,
Couldn't
okay.
do that at all. So I got into premium vodka.
Okay,
and
sure.
started loving it.
I tell you, premium anything.
Oh, it makes all the difference
It's just
in the
premium
world.
anything.
That's right. They're not putting all the additives and all the impurities in it.
Right.
But Uncle Nearest is a smooth whiskey. There's no doubt about it. It's one of my favorites. And it's not just because it's ethnically similar to me.
Right.
It is just really a good whiskey.
And I bet you
the-
wish you were the one
I
importing
know. I
this,
wish. I
right?
really do wish I was one of the people that brought it in, or my sons at least
Right.
brought it in. But the events that I mean, if I were ever to talk to the owners of Uncle Nearest, I would say that Mark is you are knocking it out of the park, because every event I've come to, not only is it well attended, but the food that you give us, I never feel like I didn't get my money's worth.
Yeah, thanks.
I really feel that. And the way you don't get in our way or anything else, but you make sure there's eye candy, there's lots of food. You know?
Isn't that a good party?
And the whiskey's
Well,
good.
look, this gets me back to my party days. I'm academic, I'm a businessman, I'm a party guy.
Yeah, do it,
I mean,
do
I
it.
just got back from Fuji Rock. This is the 16th time.
You've been to Fuji Rock.
16th time I've
Did
been
you,
to
did
Fuji
your wife
Rock.
like Fuji Rock too?
She
That's
went
it.
once. She
And
didn't
she
like
said
it.
it's not
I
her
put her
thing.
to sleep in a little
Good.
like a hollow log because she was tired and cold. I was raving
What about
at
your
2
son? What
o'clock
about your
in the
son? What
morning.
about your son?
I took him last year.
And what did he say?
He loved it.
He's
Absolutely.
into
He's a hip hop kid, but I made sure to ground him in rock.
Make sure he
you can
understands
go-
that. So you
you
got
can
to
go
get that
do
base.
your hip hop
You
thing.
get
I
that.
like hip hop, by the way.
Right.
I actually like He's turned me on to Japanese hip hop as well. But no, I'm a rocker, you know. And
you go.
there's a certain lifestyle that goes with being a rocker, and I live it as much as I can.
Well, Mark, listen, before I end the podcast, there's a question I always love to ask of my guest, and that is, if you were able to go back in time with all the knowledge you have now and meet the younger Marc Fuoti, how old would that Marc Fuoti be, and what advice would you give him?
Wow, that's a deep question. It would probably be in my 30s. I was a more aggressive person than I am. I was never an obnoxious or a aggressive, nasty person, but I was pretty demanding and I was pretty controlling, a bit of a temper, I guess. And I'm such a chilled out person now. And look, you can't speed up life. The older you get, the more mature you get, the more calm, the more peaceful you are. I think I would have said to him, power, you have your power, you don't need to use your power. And I think that might have made me maybe a more polished person as a younger man. And that one, and probably another thing, getting back to my dad, who was like the most wonderful man in the world. New York cop, didn't even finish high school, became a lieutenant, got his college degree afterward. Really impressive guy, really, and beautiful person. But the thing about him most was he was charming. And they called him Charming Chuck. And I think if I could ever get a more charming part of my personality, I would want that. My dad was the most charming person I've ever met, and I think as a man, you want to be powerful, but you also want to be charming. And if you can have those two combinations, then I think you can really express yourself as a man in the best way.
Beautiful, Mark. Thank you so much.
Same here, Lance.
We're going to do this again.
I'd love to. And how long did it take us to do this, right?
Man, a year,
I
2 years.
was
big time.
I was
Let's-
bobbing and
I'll do it.
weaving and
Shoot. Couldn't get you. Thank you so much. For sure. I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And never forget, It's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.